here to Justin Kohler, who's going to talk a bit about BloodHound Enterprise. If you want to come over here and take a seat and check it out, I'll hand it over to you, Justin.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about assimilating into the collective, or mergers and acquisitions with BloodHound Enterprise. We have multiple customers who have used used BloodHound Enterprise in this use case, and so I'll just talk to you about their experience after I figure out how the little clicker works. All right. So what we're going to cover is attack path risk in mergers and acquisitions, challenges with the existing ways that people try to deal with this, and then how our customers specifically do this. So first of all, what is an identity attack path? So an identity attack path is just a string of misconfigurations or unpatchable configurations or privileges that allow an attacker to go from a low privilege context to a high privilege context. So this is an example from Active Directory where a user is a member of multiple groups, which eventually gets an adversary a path to domain admins. Now, why is that important? So this is our organization, Phantom Corp. We have our own forest and a couple different subdomains, and we announced that we want to acquire Ghost Corp. Now, one thing that we might be really concerned about is the attack paths within that organization. And before we put anything like a domain trust in place, we want to understand that risk. Because, for example, before that forest is put in, or before that trust is put in place, we could have an individual configuration buried within that organization like this. And I show you this because we've seen this multiple times. So for those not familiar with this specific configuration Active Directory, this is very, very bad. This allows anybody in the forest to push any change across every host in the environment. So something like this we've seen multiple times on client engagements that's buried deep within the organization, but that allows anybody to traverse the forest and across our trust and threaten the security of our main environment. So we don't want to do that. And so how do we try to address this today? Well, we have things like questionnaires that we might send the subsidiary, like fill this out. We might have consulting engagements that are like point in time, assess my environment, tell me everything that you can find about it. Or we might have to try to deploy our security stack to that other environment. The problems with those, the questionnaires are unreliable. They're really like audit focused. They provide a lot of valuable information, but they don't address this specific risk. The consultant engagements are point in time. So Active Directory and Azure aren't stagnant. They change all the time. So if we put in a bad change after the consulting engagement takes place, we might miss that, and then again have the same risk that comes from that. And then finally, pushing our security stack is historically really slow. We've had a lot of customers struggle with, how fast can they get that subsidiary to move and deploy agents and stuff like that. So, and there's a survey done by another organization. I linked it here. You can review all the details, but most see subsidiary risk for those that do mergers and acquisitions as a top 10 priority. They have multiple attacks that they can either directly attribute to the subsidiary, and they're not surprised by a subsidiary breach. So resistance to the acquisition, you're not going to stop it. So the CEO has already signed off on it. You're not going to say like, hey, I don't think that we should acquire this company. That's not possible. So you have to figure out how to enable this. So what do we need? We need a quick and painless visibility across the entire environment. We need enterprise-wide continuous visibility of risk. So not just at one organization, we need the entire view. We need to identify and fix critical attack paths. And what I mean by that is, you have a short amount of time between the acquisition and the domain trust putting in place. You need to find and fix like low-hanging fruit that can significantly change the security view of that subsidiary before you actually put in the domain trust. And you need to track progress and report on status. So this is how customers use BloodHound Enterprise to do this today. So BloodHound Enterprise installs in 5 minutes. It does not require privilege, and there are minimal resource requirements. So this is like a virtual machine with 8 to 16 gigs of RAM, super fast to get installed. That single deployment enumerates the entire forest. So with cross-trust visibility, we can enumerate every domain, even the ones that company may have forgotten about. This has really happened. So they've forgot that they have a domain trust in place, and we found it for them. We also now support offline collection. So for ICS or non-connected environments, we can analyze those environments and bring those into BloodHound Enterprise. And then we also cover Azure and Entra ID, or whatever they call it today. So when we go through this visibility of the entire enterprise, we're really looking at assessing each one of these organizations and mapping every attack path as deep as they go. We want to try to find the biggest source of risk, so we're going to measure the risk by the percentage of users who can abuse it. So obviously we want to fix that one before we fix this one. And after that's done, we kind of have a scorecard or a report card of our entire enterprise environment of that subsidiary. And we can focus on the right problems. So, we may eventually want to address some risk down here, maybe post-acquisition, but we really need to address a couple of these before we put in the trust. So we have this risk level that we're at right now, which is critical, really bad. We really don't want to put that domain trust in place. And we can take, this is our risk target. Let's say it's 40%. And we can take specific steps that BloodHound Enterprise will call out. And again, these are easy fixes. This is not like change the architecture of the directory. We're talking about massive misconfigurations that are super easy to fix. So we address a couple of these, and now we're below our risk target, and we can actually put in the domain trust or sync the tenant. I'm using a lot of Active Directory examples here, but this extends into Azure as well. So now we can connect the environment. And we've removed the uncertainty of that acquisition. We've eliminated some key attack paths. We still have work to do post-acquisition, but we've eliminated the biggest low-hanging fruit, and we've enabled the acquisition, which is the most important thing. Again, you're not going to stop it, so how can you make it as comfortable as possible for the security person? This is what this looks like in BloodHound Enterprise. So we can see, when we first deployed in an environment, we have a huge level of risk that we want to cut down. And you can see the massive amount of changes that will be done. And again, these are buried within Active Directory or Azure, where a large portion of the environment has control over a specific object. And that object allows an adversary, and I keep saying adversary, but it could be, insider threat. It could be, honestly, it could be just like an IT admin pushes the wrong change and cripples the rest of the forest. So we want to try to address that as fast as possible. And these are this is an example environment, but this is what we see when our customers use BloodHound Enterprise in acquisitions. It's the only way that they can get continuous visibility on this risk in a quick amount of time. So I have to put one more Star Trek meme in here, but anybody have any questions about how we do this? No? Cool. That's it.